Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the UNM Business and Economic Summit. I'm Garnett Stokes, president at UNM, and I am so delighted to see so many of you here. But that's really not a surprise at all, really, because our focus today is on entrepreneurship in New Mexico, and our state is full of smart and innovative entrepreneurs and business leaders. Today, we're going to do a collective deep dive on the Right to Start Act, looking at it as a potential tool for reducing barriers for entrepreneurs in our state. We know that our entrepreneurs are a vital element for job growth, and that the better they do, the better all of our communities do. I know Right to Start is a big swing. Nationally, it's part of a larger campaign to rebuild the American economy by making entrepreneurial opportunity a top priority in every community. But we've got a great start here in New Mexico. Just look around at this building. Here at Rainforest Innovations and at Innovate ABQ, we've developed an entrepreneurial ecosystem with a lot of remarkable and in some cases unconventional partners, from visionary researchers at UNM to the creative dreamers at Meow Wolf. And it's paying dividends. Among our 18 peer institutions, for every $2 million in research dollars spent, UNM is first in number of licenses and options signed, and second in the number of startup companies created. Pretty impressive. To date, there have been 159 startups formed based on technologies developed at the University of New Mexico. Of those companies, 55% are still in business and active, and a majority of those active are in New Mexico. We also offer entrepreneurial training programs like the EDA University Center, which provides training, resources, and technical assistance by local experts and mentors to emerging entrepreneurs at all UNM campuses. Most recently, UNM Rainforest Innovations was awarded a New Mexico Tribal Entrepreneurship Grant to create broader opportunity and mitigate the barriers that impact tribal entrepreneurs. We're also proud to host Innovate New Mexico every year, where we bring together New Mexico's research institutions to highlight the newest research and developments. As you can see, we are continually striving to extend our reach, widen our circle of partners, and improve our programs. We do that through collaboration, mentorship, and by always asking questions and challenging assumptions. We're so glad to have you at today's summit to ask those questions and to challenge the status quo. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all you do to help create better opportunities for our entrepreneurs. Working together, we are making a healthier, happier, and more prosperous New Mexico. It is now my pleasure to invite to the podium our next speaker and a distinguished guest, a former public school educator who also happens to be one of New Mexico's longest serving volunteers in the Big Sisters, Big Brothers program. Our speaker served in the New Mexico legislature on the Legislative Finance Committee for 11 years before being elected as our lieutenant governor in 2018. In this role, he participates in the National Council of State Governments, serving as co-chair of its Fiscal Health Subcommittee, tasked with exploring policies that support resilient state budgets and the fiscal status and operations of the states. He has fought for more investments in quality after-school learning and early childhood education, and strives to better his communities through policy changes for students and for educators. I'm now proud to introduce to you the 30th Lieutenant Governor of the state of New Mexico. Please help me welcome Howie Morales.
Well, good morning. It's so good to be here. I have to tell you that my day started pretty early today. We had a full day here in Albuquerque, but I have young children, so I had to make sure and rush back and get there for the important things, homework, practice, other things that are done there. So my day started at 4 this morning, drove up here, a great opportunity to meet and to reconnect with many of you that I haven't seen in so long. Upon this finishing up the discussion here, I'll be heading to the Embassy Suites to talk about infrastructure as we have our 25th annual infrastructure convention that's taking place here. And I think that it goes hand in hand exactly of what we're discussing. When we're talking about innovation and we're talking about the possibilities that we have within the state, it takes me back to some time that I did serve in the state legislature. And I know that we have 3 who are going to serve on the panel today who are going to be wonderful individuals who are going to talk about the importance of connecting government with education, with business, and having the ability to see how we can make that collaborate and coordinate. Because I can remember a time when I was within the state legislature, as Senator Padilla can remember some of that as well. When we hit the national recession in 2010, I had just come in for about 2 years with the legislature and the Senate, and I was on the finance committee. So all these years, you're told that finance committee is where you want to be. Finance committee is where the decisions are made. And then we hit a recession and cuts had to be made. And I can recall when those cuts had to be made and talking to people across the state. And it's not that people were being greedy or looking out for themselves. They were just trying to survive. And oftentimes the request would be, I know you have to cut, but if you have to cut, please don't cut us. And as a finance member, I would ask the question, okay, we have to have a balanced budget. Can you give me some suggestions of where we should cut? And oftentimes the answer that would come back and say, we don't know, but please don't cut us. And at that moment, I made it a point that I would always make sure that we recognize that not putting different interests in competition, but rather in collaboration to make sure, especially in the areas that are so important to me when it comes to education, that we're going to ensure that we're not dividing early childhood education, K-12 versus higher ed and adult basic education. And having this opportunity to bring the partners that we have today, and each one of you with the partnerships and the ideas and the innovation right here in this wonderful building of the opportunities that we have within our state. And I have to say that, working with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham and working with our state legislature, the reality of it is you have to make sure there's collaboration. Sure, we're going to have disagreements. Sure, there's going to be times that we have different ideas of how to get to the best possible route of success. But at the end of the day, when we look and see over these last 3.5 years, I'm really proud. I think there's been 4 significant areas that I just want to touch on briefly. One of those areas is recognizing early childhood education and recognizing the importance for making sure that we can have affordable, quality care at the youngest stages. And I'm proud to see Senator Padilla here, who was the sponsor of what I think is landmark legislation of an early childhood and care department that we're one of only 4 states in the whole country that has really focused their attention on that area. And before that, I think that there was a lot of efforts that were made, but very little funding that supported that. When we see the efforts that are made right here and recognizing that the most important stages of a child's life is at that early childhood stage, and that key component of making sure our investments are there, we've done that. But it hasn't stopped there, because we also recognize that with our education system and the importance of having professionals within that classroom, we've seen that the vacancy rate all across the country has been impactful. And you see that when there's a 22%, 26%, or thousands of teachers across the country, New Mexico, we're really doing something about that. And we see that we're impacting and we're cutting that vacancy rate in large numbers. And a big part of that goes back to the collaboration that we have with our legislature. Because with the work of our legislature and our governor and our executive is making sure that our educators are the highest paid educators in the whole region. And that is significant. That's something we should celebrate. It just doesn't stop there on the compensation piece, because we have to recognize that support is needed. We have to recognize that we need to make sure that we're doing all we can to provide that professional development and that instructional opportunity for coaching for them to have that support. So that's on the K-12 system. And when we look at the higher ed side, the impactful legislation that's been done, when we have now access to a fully funded lottery scholarship, which was the promise that was made by New Mexico so many years ago, is something that we're going to see continued benefit now that we have the opportunity scholarship, the opportunity for innovation, the opportunity for creation, the opportunity that we're trying to explore today and to build on. And not just for those students who are going or career ready or degree ready, but also those who want to go into the certificates, the welding, the plumbing, those much needed areas that we see when we talk about infrastructure, when we talk about this innovation or building, we need to make sure that that's in collaboration. And then when we look at our tax structure, I think that's significant. And there's a lot of debate that goes on when we talk about our tax structure. And we recognize that in the state of New Mexico, we're fortunate because it wasn't too long ago when we were in the state where we had our bond ratings that were cut and that we had nearly 0% reserve. Today, through fiscal responsibility, fiscal management, and working together while still providing support to people across the state of New Mexico, we sit at a 28% reserve. And that's significant because we've been able to provide some of that much needed relief of whatever has taken place over the last couple of years with inflation, what we've seen that has taken place in other areas that have been impacted by COVID. And we see that the continued championing of legislation that's going to benefit New Mexicans. We no longer go in and tax our seniors, most seniors, at a double taxation rate for Social Security. That is significant. And I know the senator worked hard on that. I know in the House, you guys had a lot of debates on that, but that was significant to get that through and to recognize that we're taking care of our veterans as well with much needed exemptions. When we see where we're at and where we're headed as a state, I've always said that it always begins and ends with education. And the education doesn't have to necessarily be a formal education in a classroom. Education can take place in all shapes and forms. But I do want to just stress one thing, is because I think across the country, ever since No Child Left Behind was passed in 1999, 2000, what happened at that point with education is it really moved the direction of that personal relationship with education, bringing that teacher, the creativity, the approaches that could be done there. It really took a different approach where it equated the bottom line of education would be test scores as compared to a bottom line of a business, which would be the profit or loss margin. And when you look and see what has happened, I'll always give the example of the 1960s or 1970s yearbook. And you can see in those 1960s and 1970s yearbook, they were pretty thick. You had a lot of programs, you had a lot of clubs, you had a lot of possibilities for participation. And that has shifted since No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top has come forward. And what you see is that there's less opportunities. So I want to just make sure as we continue to work towards innovation and creativity, is that we recognize that it takes both sides of the brain to be stimulated and to be fired up to really operate at its fullest potential. When we talk about just the areas that are tested like reading and math, I believe that we missed the point because for far too long across the country, we focused on student achievement or we focused on student proficiency when all along we should be focusing on student engagement. This is the opportunity that we have today with everyone in here, the great leaders that we have from the different sectors to have the potential and the possibilities of how can we focus not only on student engagement, but educator engagement. How can we focus on community engagement and our stakeholders being a part of that? That is a challenge that we present to you today. That is the opportunities that we have as you come forward and you give your ideas and your thoughts. Because the best pieces of legislation that our legislators can talk about often start off with, what if? What if? What are the possibilities and what are the ifs that we can build on after today's meeting for the potential of our state? Because bottom line, we may have some things that we agree on or we disagree on. The one thing that I know that each of us agrees on is that we want a healthy, vibrant, well-rounded state in New Mexico that is going to be safe, that's going to be prosperous, and it's going to be a state that we are continually proud of. We have something special here. And the most special thing that we have in our state is each other. And if we don't work to improve the areas that we should, if we don't work to recognize the things that we should celebrate, and if we don't take time to pat ourselves on the back once in a while, who will? This is the opportunity and the challenge that we all have together. And I'm confident that after today's meeting, after the discussions, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to move forward with. So thank you for this opportunity to be here, to welcome you, to thank you on behalf of the state of New Mexico. And I look forward to the wonderful discussions that your panelists are going to provide and answer questions for each one of you. Thank you.